Well, hi, everybody. I'm Stacey Torigoe. I was born and raised on Mokuokeave, Hawaii Island in the Ahupua'a of Waiakea. I currently live and work in the Ola'a Ahupua'a. It is my great honor to be here in the NREM seminar to share some success stories in long-term invasive plant management at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. So I currently work at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park as an ecologist, focusing on invasive species control and prevention. Rapid invasive so that includes everything from rapid death, invasive plants, biosecurity, little fire ants, which means a lot of different things day to day. So all joking aside, I actually do get to wear a lot of different hats and do some really cool natural resources work, maybe not in the portions that I want, but that's okay. Get paid to do a lot of I know work. Yeah, and get a lot of satisfaction. So I think the work that I do is pretty well encapsulated by this millennial layout. Elava ike o'ao amalama aeoe malka na'ao. He takes his teachings and applies them and increases his knowledge. So much of the management work in a national park, controlling invasive species kind of falls into this area of applied science, where you take the science and it becomes and it is implemented as a
microphone. Maybe you need to find microphone.
Oh, turn it.
Yeah, microphone. Yeah.
That's better.
Oh,
I'm not sure if it actually works in those
Oh, yeah?
system.
oh, okay.
So
Doesn't matter, maybe.
yeah,
All right.
makes a difference.
Sorry to bother you.
No, you're good. Yeah, but I love being in this position where I can work with researchers to develop projects that have impact on resource management and steer that legacy of long-term management into the future. So I was asked to talk really briefly about the career path. And I guess I caught the ecology bug when I was a biology major in college. I was going to do the med school thing and then took an ecology class and was like, this is way more fun to do cool science outside. And did an internship at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, worked at National Park in California, went National Park in Alaska, and then kind of ended up back to Haleakala for a few years, came back to school, thank you to the Maloa Foundation, finished my MS, and got a job a couple of years later at Hawaii Volcanoes as the ecologist, where I work now. Applying everything that I learned in NREM to native ecosystem protection, and promise you, everything you learn in NREM will be useful someday. Looking at you, NREM 600. I was like, I will never use this anything I learned in this class, but I promise it will be. We will learn stuff that you use. So today I'm excited to share 3 success stories in long-term invasive plant management from Hawaii Volcanoes. Eradications of invasive species, a near eradication of fountain grass, and scalable and strategic ecosystem protection in special ecological areas. So these projects were started like before I was born. These are not things that I started. They were initiated by visionary managers who saw far into the future these challenges that we would have 20, 30, 40, 50 years later. And I think it's important to tell these stories because they demonstrate that successful management is possible with persistence, dedication, and strategic organization. Got to put some acknowledgements up front because folks like Tim and Rhonda really saw the future as far as species success. But backing up a little bit, you all are probably familiar with this. We have amazing biocultural resources here in Hawaii, tremendously high rate of endemism and biodiversity, but also an extraordinarily high rate of endangerment and extinction. The ecosystems at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park exemplify the diversity of the Hawaiian Islands. Their biodiversity is shaped by geography and so the park geography stretches from sea level all the way up to 4,000 feet at the summit of climates with 0.7 inches of rain a month to 21.3 inches a month. So that translates to dozens of different vegetation types, which means a tremendously high level of diversity. At Habo, natural resources are cultural resources. The park was established in 1916 to protect and preserve natural and cultural resources for future generations. Native Hawaiians have been a living part of this landscape, including the sacred summit of Kilauea for thousands of years. Fortunately, like a bunch of Hawaii's irreplaceable resources are threatened by invaders. Ungulates, predators, invasive plants, emerging diseases, and threats like rapid pea death, fire ants, threaten the fabric of Hawaiian ecosystems. And once ungulates are removed from the landscape, the next step is to control invasive plants so that native ecosystems can be built. It can feel like a hopeless task to look at the headlines. It seems like every day you turn on the news and there's another extinction. Sometimes combating invasive species just feels like it's never ending competition. But there is hope in the form of prioritization. So we'll just back up again to some basic invasion biology. You may already be familiar with this invasion curve. Here on the left, we have prevention and early detection and rapid response. This is where you get the most bang for your buck in eradication. So if we can control species at this low level, the cost is much lower, the impact to the environment is much lower, and it's just much easier to control and allow invasion to get to this point where the cost is higher. You have to send a lot more people, use a lot more herbicide, and it's just not as desirable. So if we can cheat biology and catch invasions at this point in the curve, that's where we want to go. So here's an illustration. You might get one seed of invasive grass in your area, grass, make some seeds, wind blows, some more seeds, some more plants, some more grass, make some more seeds, sorry. Lots more seeds. What if when we get this one grass, more grasses then come in, the manager sees this and is like, wait, we should stop this before it gets to the point of no return and we control it. Okay. Voila, stopped an invasion. We cheated biology. So this is our hypothesis. If we can do consistent treatment return intervals that interrupt invasive plant reproduction, we can get effective control in the long term. Eventually, you'll exhaust that seed bank, except maybe in something like gorse, where you have like 400-year seed life. But in something like fountain grass, where you have only a 2 to 7 year seed life, you might be able to get rid of that species. So here's case study number 1. Where we have some localized eradications. So at Hawaii Volcanoes, doing localized control of high-risk incipients since the 1980s, looking for high-risk invasive species based on the Hawaii Risk Assessment and information from our partners at the Big Island Invasive Species Committee. These are things that have a high possibility of becoming ecologically damaging, but are not yet widespread in the park. So there's usually 3 phases for this incipient control. The initial treatment or knockdown usually takes the most time and effort. And then you get to a regular return interval where you can come back every 6 months to a year or 1 month to a year, depending on when you need to get back in order to cheat biology. It's all about that return interval. And then the final phase, once you've knocked that down over several years, it's the monitoring stage. Once populations are reduced to the point where seed bank is nearly exhausted, You just have to come back and monitor repairs. Sometimes this takes like 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and you just have to keep it back. Fortunately, over the last 20 years, I'm happy to report that we have 33 species at that final monitoring stage, so they're mostly dead, basically eradicated. And 23 species basically are eradicated. That's due to continuing dedication, organization. We have a database and designated return intervals for each species based on biology and perseverance. It takes a certain kind of person to be able to go back to the same place over and over every 6 months and look for plants. And we are really fortunate that we've got staff that are really passionate about that and have done a great job. So it's thanks to them that we can say that these are eradicated. Yes. Case study number 2, fountain grass. So this is near eradication. Tomoaki's getting excited. So I don't know if you know this name. That might be the fountain grass is like this highly flammable ecosystem modifying grass. It's really terrible on Big Island, facilitates large grass fires, especially in lava landscapes where you normally have natural fuel breaks in between trees and shrubs. It can carry fire through those landscapes and really destroy it forest. That grass, it contributes to this grass fire cycle where grass burns, it burns your native trees. The native trees are less adapted to fire, so they jump back and they get grass. Grass burns again, and it's a vicious cycle where you lose natives and gain invasives. It's not great. So here's a great picture of the fountain grass inundating a natural natural fuel break, lava flow. At Point Volcanoes, we have 34,000 acres of dry ocean woodlands. They are lava escapes punctuated by sparsely vegetated orchia and shrubs. And this is a landscape where fountain grass could really do it for. This is the Helena polyfire, which happened just last year. Started from lightning strike out in the middle of the backcountry in an orchia tree. It stayed at 4 acres, and goodness knows what would happen if there was fountain grass there, because it would have ripped across that coastal landscape. So how to cheat biology? As my old mentor Steve Anderson would say, no doubt I'm not going to what's coming. So fountain grass biology, it's wind dispersed, and it only takes 6 to 12 months to reach reproduction. So we really want to nip that in the bud before it's being reproductive. The seed bank is 7+ years. So anyone want to guess what the return interval, what you want your return interval to be? It's cheating. It's 4 to 6 months. So if you can get back to each population every 4 to 6 months, we're going to reduce that seed bank and hopefully eventually exhaust it. So starting way back, 1985, park managers were like, wow, this is the problem. There is this core of fountain grass down here, just super dense populations. We're just never going to have the money to treat that. But up here in the rest of the park, where we have roads and visitors and lava features, we have all these outlier populations, these asterisks. So maybe we can treat those with funding that we have. That's what they did for 85, to the tune of $84,000 a year in 2023 money. So every 6 months, they went to all these asterisks and revisited and sprayed anything that came up. And that was pretty successful. This is one of the populations that they treated, and over time we saw that gradually in the numbers. And then in the 90s, we got enough funding to the tune of $130,000 a year to treat that core population out here, Shadowlands. So that was 25,000 hectare surveyed and treated every 6 months, everything from helicopter camping to horseback camping to surveys to just guys climbing up and down the pulleys with backpack sprayers. 11,000 plants in 96, that's kind of a high. Yeah, it was an expensive and costly and really challenging endeavor, but it paid off because now in the present day, we're kind of in this maintenance phase where we can do an aerial survey and control with precision spot sprayer. You can see the photographs down there, it's pretty small. But across 1,500 acres of the park, we do this 4 times a year, plus roadside eradication, and that costs about $70,000 a year, but it's the best $70,000 spent. Compared to the cost of a wildfire, compared to the cost of rebuilding infrastructure, compared to the cost of emergency response, this is the best money you'll ever spend. So, yeah, you can see from 96 down to the last 20 years, basically 2002 to 2023, we've treated less than 1,000 plants a year. But that takes constant maintenance. It takes repeated returning to the same places, flying those same lines, looking for plants, and just getting them before they reproduce, cheating biology. So the next steps for this, we just acquired a large parcel in Torigoe, south of Kabuku. Through this and imaged it with Brian Roy's Stab Lab, and they are working on automated detection of fountain grass in this lava landscape. So that will help us get an idea of how much fountain grass we have to deal with and what our strategies next for this new person. So some lessons from fountain grass control. This is a little wordy, but I think these are worthwhile. Invasive plant control is a long game. Could take decades, but that's what it takes. Is like you have to pick your goals and stick with them, and pick your battles. Choose those emerging threats like fountain grass with high potential to alter ecosystems. Your fire management goals can parallel with natural resources management goals, and that's how we got funding to support this program. Start with the outliers, move to the core, what resources are available. Control intervals need to be short enough to interrupt those reproductive cycles. Cheating biology, that's my hashtag. And then those knockdown efforts are costly but worthwhile. But once you get to the maintenance phase, you can't keep up. You gotta keep indefinitely maintaining to maintain that near eradication stage. Case study number 3 is special ecological areas. So we're coming back to we're actually going to the far right on the invasion curve. Sorry, I should have put it on the slide, but this reality check, realizing that some invasive plants will just never be eradicable. And without a substantial funding increases in kind, we're just not going to achieve full control of all the invasive plants in the park. It's 130,000 acres. I have 4 permanent full-time staff, and then a bunch of seasonal, intern, temporary laborers. So we have to pick our battles. We get a lot done with what we have, but when everything is a priority, nothing is a priority, and so we have to choose where are we going to put our resources to make a difference for the ecosystems. So the first step is to quantify resources, like how many person hours will we need to dedicate to invasive species control, and actually do this every year, spreadsheet it out, figure out how much it's going to take to control X amount of units, how many hours we have based on the number of personnel we have, and then figure out where we're going to put those hours based on what the value is, T&E habitat, incipient weeds, and then maintaining these areas long term. It's a commitment. So the criteria for selection, and again, this is a system that I did not create. This is something that was created in the 80s. Ecological representation, so we want to preserve some dry forest, some wet forest, some mesic forest in between. feasibility. Are we gonna be able to get to these places? We want to pick a forest in the middle of the backcountry that's gonna take 2 days to get to versus something that's accessible right off the road. Biodiversity, are there rare species there? We've done a lot of outlines. And then research, cultural and interpretation of value. How can these resources be of value to visitors and to future generations? So this system started with 6 units in 1984. I think it was like first time we call it Nahuku now, small tract, just really small scale, like things that were feasible to do with staff of 2 or 3 or 4. And over time, we've been able to expand that to 117,000 acres, and that not all of that is currently managed. We've had to scale back. Talk about that a little bit more, but at one point or another, we've upscaled, we've downscaled, depending on what funding we have, or if there's a weather or natural disasters. So it's definitely possible to scale up and scale down the system. So yeah, every year I set targets for the year based on biology and how many resources are available. Systematically sweep the units, remove all the invasive units. All in there in the background. In this nice line sweeping through the unit. And then our return intervals are 2 to 5 years. So again, if you have cheap biology, you stay ahead of reproduction like anything else. You can the phenology, the time to reproduction for ginger or pine tree is about 5 years. So if we can get back into units every 5 years and sweep them, which we've been doing since like 1984 for some of these places, we can stay ahead of biology. We can do this long term. So I think we've talked about this a little bit, but this knockdown phase is where the most intensive input is required. And then over time, in the maintenance phase, your control costs decrease, they're pretty level. You can kind of expect what to see over time with less reproduction, cheating biology, just gonna hammer it in. But again, you have to stay on these return intervals, because otherwise, this is what happened in 2023. We had some worse stoppages in 2018 with a catastrophic eruption. Had this little thing called a pandemic that people weren't working, and then return intervals got longer. We missed intervals for some of these units. So this pink orange bar is the knockdown cost. It's this initial high cost. The green is the maintenance cost. So that's kind of like this phase where you're just coming back every 5 years maintaining. And then this blue bar is our cost in 2022, 2023. So the cost per hectare has gone up substantially just because we missed a couple of 1 or 2 intervals. We're back to knockdown phase in some places. But we have faith we're going to get through that knockdown, and then we'll get back to maintenance. So the future of SCAs, we're going to probably keep going with these same strategies, but hopefully get some new technologies going to reduce labor inputs. Some of you have probably heard about incision point application. Normally we have folks go out with chainsaws to cut stuff via trees or Christmas berry, and that's just super time and labor intensive. There's like added hazards, you're using a chainsaw. But with IPA or incision point application, you can just make a cut at the base of the tree and drop a little bit of herbicide into that cut, and then the tree will die eventually. So we tried this with Christmas berry out at Kikukumamane, one of our new dry forest SEAs, and on the left side bars are the incision point application. So x-axis, that's the technique. On the y-axis is the 8-hour person days on the left side. You can see that IPA took substantially less work and was substantially more productive in the graph on the right. So we got more hectare production than with chainsaws. That's something worth learning for the future. So this is something that I would love to get a grad student to help me with, actually. Labor costs are increasing. We've got tropical pressure from outside the park increasing. And I don't really know how to say how invasive plant densities today compare with plots read. I got read in like 96 and 2011. So it's in my mind like a perfect grad student opportunity. I'm working on funding for it. Yeah, come talk story if you're interested. And finally, some lessons from SBA work. So again, invasive plant control is a long thing. It's going to take decades. But if you can organize and prioritize and get those return intervals down short enough to interrupt reproduction, you can see success with long-term invasive plant control. I think that's all I have. But this is my buzz to come work with us. We have an RCH job open for the next 2 weeks for a data technician. And I'm looking to hire a couple of folks to help with biosecurity inspections. Those are 6 technician jobs. And should be posting soon on USA Jobs. Get your federal resumes ready. If you have questions about federal resumes or applying for jobs, for careers in the National Park Service, or anything else, please feel free to email me. Thank you.
We have some questions in the chat already, so maybe I'll lead with the one question that's in the chat right now. What role do community and public engagement play in addressing the issue of invasive species in the park, and how can individuals contribute to these efforts?
It's a great question. Volunteers are super important. They're our ambassadors, but they also can help on the ground with invasive species control. We have an awesome program called Stewardship for the Summit. So it's actually run by a couple of retired folks from Volcano who saw all the ginger in the park and said, how can we help? And they basically started this volunteer program, and they run it twice a week. And they go out and take whoever is willing to show up and get their hands dirty to kill ginger. So that's one way. And the other way is to just engage with the Big Island Invasive Species Committee and what the work that they're doing. So they have their eyes out for some incipient weeds in our neighborhoods nearby the park. So if you go to the Big Island Invasive Species Committee website, they've got lots of great information about weeds that you can look out for. I think they also offer some help on how to do invasive control. That's
You showed the very nice graph of the fountain grass, and you said it has a 7-year seed lifetime. You've been doing this for over 20 years. Why do you still have fountain grass?
Yeah, that's a great question. So fountain grass, so after 6 to 12 months, fountain grass will start putting out seeds. And if we miss a couple of plants in the helicopter cycle, like quickly, they're hard to see on the lava, then that plant might put out some seeds. And then we also have plants outside of the park. It's a wind dispersed species, so we're inevitably going to get some fountain grass flowing.
So that's why you're never going to eradicate it.
We're never going to eradicate it. It's mostly dead. But it's at a better stage. It's in a better place than it would be if we were doing this.
Thanks so much for your talk. I remember you were talking about perseverance and how important it is in these kinds of jobs. I was wondering if this gives any advice for how do you can you teach perseverance and then train like people to go on these jobs? Like how would you prepare?
Oh, that's a good question. A lot of times, honestly, when I'm hiring, I'll look at resumes, and if people have experience in things like waitressing or menial labor, or landscaping, I'll be like, okay, this person knows how to work hard and do things that are really repetitive and not necessarily give up. Because it's not always, because conservation is awesome. You get to work outside, you get to be in touch with the resources. You're not stuck in an office all day, but it's also not always glamorous. Spend a lot of time on your feet, thinking around paths, uneven terrain, rain a lot. I think you either love it or you hate it, or you can learn to love it, but it's easier if you already love being outside. So I try to look for that when I read questions and
Okay, so thank you for your presentation, really excellent presentation. So you mentioned you use aerial survey, and since you see the flight path in your presentation, I just thinking it's about you using drone technology, right?
drone technology.
Oh, yeah, you use that?
No, unfortunately, there has been basically a DOI stand down, Department of Interior stand down on using drone technology. Yeah, it's really challenging to work with because there is a lot of potential. I think there is a lot of potential, and this is my personal perspective. There's a lot of potential for drones to be really helpful in conservation work. But yeah, unfortunately, right now it's way easier to use a helicopter than it is to go into the red tape of drones.
Will you use this method for the future? I mean that I'm not from here, but in my country, for invasive species management, we use drone technology to identify the species distribution, also the population dynamic. We combine 3 sensors, including multispectral, hyperspectral, and LiDAR, and trying mapping in every day we use that. So maybe it will be very good because you need a rapid assessment about the species just distribution. Thank you.
Totally. Yeah, I've talked with Ryan, Dr. Roy about using drones to detect rapido death. He's got that technology pretty dialed. So I think if anything, that may be our first pilot, but
There's a question over here. Yeah, so you mentioned the $70,000 a year for your first species. When you're doing these helicopter surveys and precision surveys, that sort of thing, is this one invasive at a time? Are you combining all of your efforts and, during the survey, we're looking for fountain grass, but if we see this, we want to go after another species, what sort of logistics are involved in?
See, there's a couple of things. So when we're loading up to spray for fountain grass, we'll use a very like a grass targeted herbicide. So it'll be a combination of glyphosate and Massacure. That's really just targeted at fountain grass. We can use it for other things. So if I saw a green grass out in the middle of nowhere, which is another species that we keep near eradication, probably spray that too. But our guy who's in charge of this project will keep an eye out for Albizia or Silgo or anything else that pops up. So he'll take GPS point and then we'll just be back. Deal with it with another herbicide.
We have 2 additional questions online. Sorry, were you done with that one? I don't want to cut you off.
No, you're fine.
Okay, all right. So in terms of policy and regulation, what measures are in place to prevent the introduction of new invasive species to the park? And are there opportunities for policy improvements?
Yeah, that's a great question. So internal to the park, we do have an SOP for contractors and for researchers, because they're the folks who are going off-road. And that's like kind of the most concerning areas where things can get introduced. We have food brushing stations. Visitors are great about using them. And then visitors generally park in the same places. So I actually have somebody will go around and survey for little fire ants. And she'll also, when she sees a fountain grass on the side of the road, she'll pull it. So I'm really lucky to have that dedicated person. She's basically our watchdog on the front line. And but every contractor, researcher who goes off-road has to get inspected before they move to the park. That's our policy. As far as policy improvements in the state, it's not really my area of expertise, but say that we can probably see some improvements on the state level. The coconut rhinoceros introduction, blah, 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 is that not preventable? I don't know. That's my personal feelings, not the perspective of Park Service.
So we have another, more of a comment, I think, than a question, from, Dr. Ken Kaneshiro. Excellent presentation of NPS efforts to control invasive species. Just a comment. I know you probably do not have the resources to monitor population genetics of the invasive species as you knock down populations and subject to bottleneck situations. I'm concerned by subjecting to series of bottlenecks might be conducive to generating genetic variants that may be better and better adapted to the changing habitat. Sorry, not being critical of the great efforts you're doing with these invasives, but something to keep in the back of our minds. Do you want to comment about that?
No, I think that's an excellent point. And like herbicide resistance is a big topic. So we do try to rotate herbicides when we can. So we use a combination of glyphosate and imazapyr, or just imazapyr, or glyphosate, and invasive, and yeah, a handful if we can, instead of using herbicide. But that's kind of always on the, it's always kind of on the horizon. Like, what is nature going to throw at us next? We're going to get an herbicide resistant grass, okay. But if somebody would like to come help us out with the genetics of mountain grass, please let me know.
If I may ask, I think one of your pictures shows a America pine. Is that the one that you've given up on?
I wouldn't say given up. I would say selectively managed. So Playa is a scourge on the forest, so dry forest and wet forest. It will shade out it will shade out your eucalyptus trees. So there are certain areas of the park where we control it, and those areas get swept every 5 years to keep the Playa free.
What have you noticed anything filling the void of the eradicated grass? What's coming back?
Yeah, we do see native shrubs, kiwi grass ideally is what we'd like to see. It's like Asian grass. We have some other invasive grasses that do fill the void to some extent, but none of them are. I think the key to differentiating fountain grass and guinea grass, which are 2 target species for eradication, are near eradication, are that they have much greater biomass. I don't have a picture of it here, but I have a picture of fountain grass next. Oh no, maybe I do have a picture. Yeah, so here's a fountain grass, and here are some of the other grasses that we have. So you can just see, just based on this picture, how much more biomass we have compared to the other grasses there.
Just curious, you worked both at Haleakala and at White Volcanoes National Park. I'm just wondering if you can kind of compare and contrast the challenges between the two, or yeah,
we might have to have that conversation offline.
I have a follow-up question. Looks like a lot's happening there with a few people. Would you able to explain to us how your week look like?
No, I think that's a great question, because I think management, it's so in any organization you work with, it's all about leadership, right? And the leadership where I work now is really conducive to sharing resources and helping each other out. I come to the, I think this is something I learned at NREM too, is if you come to the table with this attitude of scarcity, like nobody has enough, so I need to keep it all for myself, then nobody really has enough. But if you come to the table with an attitude like, okay, nobody has enough, but we can all share, and then we have enough, then maybe you can get something done. And at White Volcanoes, we have a shared crew between the fence crew and the bench crew. So we rotate, so that crew is like 8 to 10 guys, and they rotate weeks between bench and vets. So as I have project funding, I can put money into the crew, and they can help us out with new projects, and all of a sudden we have an army of 12 people to go sweep a giant unit, and we get a lot of work done that way. But that happens because we're able to have that shared crew situation and cooperate, and these weeks are yours, these weeks are ours, we're gonna camp this week. And that's just how it is. We share, we get more done together, get different expertise. I'm better with the administration part, John's better with the management of people, and we just work together.
Is there any relationship between wildlife and plant invasive species distribution during this site?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Is there any interaction between wildlife, I mean like an animal
wildlife.
with the invasive plant species distribution? Maybe the wildlife become an agent for the species distribution.
Well, Rapido death is kind of the case study for that. So I don't have the graph here, but we had a protected wet forest unit in Ola'a. It was fenced, and then cattle breached the fence. Pigs got in, and then we were monitoring for Rapido death, doing yearly surveys, and then all of a sudden we got this outbreak of Rapido death. So that was kind of ground zero for finding that ungulates wildlife are carrying that disease through the forest, wounding trees, and causing. But we can have that conversation offline.
We better end so we can have these conversations.
Just we're so amazed by your work, Stacey, and wondering just other lessons from NREM that you take away and you use in your work regularly, and also there's things you wish you knew when you were in NREM.
I have a whole list of them. I really do have a list. Share that. I think the big one is that all these skills, NREM is so awesome because you learn all of these different skills. Like I had to take watershed hydrology, and I was like, I don't want to take watershed hydrology. Then, like 5 years later, I had to help with like burned area assessment, and I was like, oh, I understand what's going on because I took watershed hydrology. So even the classes that you don't think you're going to learn from, take what you can, dive deep, and you never know when you'll have to use those skills again. That's right.
We do have another question online. So from Suzanne Case, who's now in a new position as director at Land and Water Conservation UH. Lots of hope and inspiration in your presentation. Do you have any formal process, connections, or funding to support getting the research you need?
I do have a couple of cooperative agreements. I got a couple through PCSU, and I have one with UHU with Dr. Roy, but always open to new collaborations with researchers. I got my ATR certification. Certainly open to helping each other out because this work is hard. So if we can do it together, it's better.
Sounds like you should have a chat with Suzanne soon. And there's also another comment from Dr. Kaneshiro. I think that if we implement a more holistic and integrative systems approach in addressing these kinds of conservation issues, Hawaii can probably serve as a model for conservation science. So again, more of a comment, not a question.
I mean, if everybody took the same approach to getting rid of fountain grass, then we probably could use less pesticide and less resources. Certainly open to better solutions. Find them. Herbicide is one of them.
I know you mentioned the lessons learned from NREM. Maybe in closing, any last words of advice for our graduate students as they get ready to go out in the world and make their difference?
Have fun. Go do something. Go volunteer. Get outside. Like, don't get stuck in the classroom behind your computer. yeah, just being outside, like working hard and learning something new. That is the most valuable experience that you take to your next job. It won't be reading a paper, it might be, but from experience, I can say that the folks who have had experience, who come to approach their research and their classwork with an eye to how it can be applied outside, those are the folks that really thrive and take management to the next level.
We want to thank you so much. It is, again, such a pleasure to have students come back who, boy, if you finished in 2018, it doesn't seem that long ago that you were here, but that was, yeah, I've only been in the department a couple of years. And so it's such a treat to see what you've been doing since then. We really appreciate it. And also, Stacey is responsible for sending a lot of job opportunity advertisements our direction. So if you see me spamming you or Dr. Mira spamming you with advertisements, a lot of times it's thanks to Stacey for helping to bring those opportunities to our attention. She mentioned the Department of the Interior specific CVs. There's a very specific process to applying for federal jobs. Oftentimes in the past, Fish and Wildlife Service has come and done like a training on how to get through that process. And through doing that training, they've been really successful in helping increase local representation, I think, in federal positions. So I don't know if one of those is planned soon, but keep your eye out for those. There should be one coming up. I think EECB had one recently too. Next week, we have Michael Walker here, which will be a wonderful follow-up because fire is clearly interrelated with all of the invasive species issues. So hope you all can join us again next week for Michael Walker's talk. He is the head of wildfire issues for the state on the Division of Forestry and Wildlife side. So when I invited him to speak, it was too difficult for him to come early in the semester for what should be obvious reasons, but he was willing to come and give a talk next week. And so we're really excited to have him here. So please be here same time, same place. There are some snacks still left, so please make sure and grab some. And Stacey will be around to answer off the record questions after we close. So thank you again so much.